Jeremy, thanks for joining us. We've been going through the book, which actually is very critical in many respects of the NHS and its, things about avoidable deaths and the fact that it doesn't take complaints very well and learn from them particularly well and has a target culture. Given that you were the longest-serving health secretary, people might say, well, you shouldn't have been writing a book about it. You should have been sorting it out when you were the health secretary.
Well, good morning, Phil. Good morning, Eston. It's a pleasure to be with you for actually my first ever interview on GB News. So I'm really delighted it's with both of you. That's exactly the question people will ask. And I don't think there's any market these days for politicians' memoirs where they try to buff up what they did and say how they got it all right and so on. What people are interested in is the NHS, not me. And so I've tried to be honest about what I got right and what I failed in. I did have a big emphasis on reducing avoidable death. And by the end of my time, we had 3 million more patients using good or outstanding hospitals. In fact, when I arrived, we didn't even know which of our hospitals were good and which weren't good. But I didn't fix the problems in the social care system. The fundamental problems in our A&E waiting times got worse, not better. So I'm pretty honest about all of that in the book. But the reason for writing it is to say, what do we do now going forward? What are the big things that need to change? And you're absolutely right. One of the things we've got to get better at is learning from mistakes, because things go wrong in all healthcare systems. But what happens too often in the NHS is the lawyers get involved, the regulators get involved, doctors are worried about getting struck off the register. And the most important thing, which is that we learn why a tragedy happened and we make sure it never happens again, ends up going to the back of the queue.
Jeremy, I'd like to say I appreciate your honesty. I mean, people always say, why aren't politicians a lot more honest? And that's the reason being, when you are, people say, well, why weren't you doing it at the time? There's always a quick answer back to you there. But I think when you say 150 preventable deaths a week, that would be the same as an aircraft falling out the sky every week, then there is a lot of work to be done. And you said, looking forward, what should we do? And again, there's another layer of complication on this, because coming out of COVID and COVID lockdowns, we've got much longer waiting lists. So I'm just wondering, you there, what would you do then going forward? Because we've got all of these backlogs to get out the way, as well as the other issues within the NHS.
Well, that's the right question to ask us, because, the world is full of books which analyse beautifully the problems we face and can't answer the question, well, what would you do about it? So I think writing this book, which 3 lockdowns actually gave me quite a bit of time to think through. If you said to me, what are the 2 biggest things we should do to improve the quality of care in the NHS? Number 1, I'd say train more doctors and nurses. We spend the same proportion of our GDP on health as France and Germany. France has 20% more doctors per head. Germany has 60% more doctors per head. We have chronically too few doctors, nurses, midwives. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've got to reverse the terrible mistake that was made under the Blair government 2 decades ago, when we scrapped people having their own family doctors. Patients obviously were very sad to have a system that most of us now have, where you're not attached to a doctor, you're attached to a surgery. But last year we saw the clinical evidence that you are 30% less likely to go to hospital if you see the same doctor over a long period of time, 25% less likely to die. And why is that? Because if you have a doctor who knows you, knows your family, you're far less likely to have a misdiagnosis. They're far less likely to miss, a crucial sign that you could have cancer. And it was just a big, big mistake.
Just wondered, Jeremy, I appreciate what you've just said there, but what you didn't mention was sort of the bureaucracy in the NHS. And when in 1948, the first year of the NHS, it cost £11.4 billion in today's prices. The 2018-19 budget was £153 billion. It's gone up faster than the GDP in the country's gone up. It's gone up faster than public expenditure as a whole. That's clearly not sustainable. Since 2009, and like I say, you were there for a lot of this period, the number of very senior managers in the NHS has gone up from 944 in 2010 to 2,700 last year. So, I mean, is this not the problem, that the government over the last 12 years has just sort of not tackled the massive bureaucracy, and that's where all the money's going into?
Well, I think they're two different issues. I totally agree with you. The biggest issue in the NHS today is the bureaucracy. There's 1.4 million people in the NHS. It's the fifth biggest employer in the world, biggest in Europe. Bill Clinton had a great saying. He said, politics is like working in a graveyard. There are lots of people underneath you, but they're not necessarily listening. And it does feel like that when you're health secretary on top of this huge pyramid. And that's why I say in this book, we should scrap the targets. We have more targets in the health service than in any other country in the world. And targets create bureaucracy because you end up having to employ people to check up on everyone. And the result is in our system that doctors, people running hospitals, nurses, they're always looking over their shoulder to their line manager to see if they're hitting the target they've been given. And they can't spend so much attention on the patient in front of them. So absolutely scrap national targets, free up doctors, nurses, midwives to focus on the patient in front of them. On the sustainability question, that is the $6 million question that is faced actually in every country in the world. I mean, the truth is we're going to pay more for our health and care. In America, you're going to pay more through your insurance premiums. In France and in Germany and Holland, you're going to pay more through your social insurance premiums. In Britain and Ireland, you're going to pay more through your taxes. And I think that is just the reality. We're living for much longer. And there are new medicines coming on stream. And so we've just got to be honest with people and make sure if it's taxpayers who are paying, that we root out the inefficiency and the bureaucracy so that people feel they're getting value for money.
The target culture, I mean, I agree with you. It leads to perverse incentives, targets, you know, you end up... But you could have got rid of the target culture when you were the Secretary of State for Health. You didn't. I just wondered whether there's a lack of political courage when it comes to it. Because, of course, if you're the Secretary of State and you get rid of a target for the number of times, you know, hours spent in A&E or something, and then somebody waits for sort of 4 times that after you've just got rid of the target, you're going to be on the front page of all the national newspapers saying this is the person to blame for the reason why you've waited so long. So is that the reason why you didn't get rid of the targets? Because of that, you feared that if you did do that, that would happen, and it's really a lack of courage that prevents politicians from doing that?
I don't think it was a lack of courage in my case. It was something slightly different. I wanted to get rid of the targets. I introduced the Ofsted inspections of hospitals and care homes and GP surgeries. And I thought once you've got that, you don't need all these targets because you've got someone independent going around telling you if a hospital is good or if it should be put into special measures. But I thought I need to hit all the targets and then I'm going to scrap them. Because otherwise people will say the reason I'm scrapping the targets is because I'm not. And unfortunately, that day never came. And I was moved to the Foreign Office. So I do look back and wish that I got rid of them anyway, because I do think that they are really bad in terms of patient safety and they create the wrong culture in the NHS. But I hope Sajid takes this opportunity because I think that, by the way, I think he's a very good health secretary. I think we're very lucky to have him. And I think at this moment after the pandemic, people are looking for a fresh start for the NHS. And I think this is a moment when you could come in and say, actually, we're going to do things differently. And we're going to make sure we're focused properly on patients. And we are going to scrap these big national targets.
But look, politics is a difficult game. It's a febrile game, and there's always lots going on. And I always say never has there been a time when you can go from hero to zero in no time. And we've seen that all the time, particularly with party leaders. So if the opportunity did arise, you've had time out, you've contemplated what went on with the NHS, you've looked at, being in various other departments, would you go for leadership?
Well, I'm not sure people will have me when they've read this book, which catalogues in gory detail all my mistakes. But I've always said that I don't rule out going back into frontline politics and even having a crack at the top job. I don't think now is the moment. We are in a very, very dangerous international situation. I know we're all thinking about Partygate at the moment. I don't think that's what will determine the next election. I think the big issues around the economy, the international situation, who's got the best plan for the long-term future for the country. Those are the things that will determine the next. And I think that Ukraine. Just to finish, Esther. I think if we had a hiatus right now, and it takes several months to change a leader because of the Conservative Party rules, I think Putin would be absolutely delighted, and it would be absolutely the wrong thing to do.
OK, but if it were, and it did, and there was an opportunity, what would you say your qualities were, and what would the difference be between you and Boris if you were to go for leader?
I think it's probably not sensible to have that discussion if you don't believe we should have a contest now, because I think it just stokes all the speculation. But let me say this, because I've said it before, but I'll say it to you. I'm obviously a totally different person to Boris. In fact, I think everyone in the world is a totally different person to Boris, because he's such a unique person. Would I have done things differently during the pandemic if I had been Prime Minister and won that contest in 2019? For sure. Would I have made some of the mistakes that Boris made? I don't think I would have, because of my experience as Health Secretary. But I would have made different mistakes. I think it's impossible to go through something as extreme as a pandemic and get everything right.
Would you have locked us down? I think that's the
reality, not just in this country, but actually leaders all over the world.
Would you have locked us down for as long?
I actually thought that we could have avoided all lockdowns if we'd been much quicker and set up test and trace as they did in South Korea and Taiwan. Those two places actually didn't have any lockdowns at all in 2020. So that would have been my preferred route.
Jeremy Hodden, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.